Hi everyone. In today's video, we are going to be interviewing Martin, who manages his schizophrenia off of medication. Hi, and welcome back to the Living Well with Schizophrenia channel. My name is Lauren, and I make videos about what it's like to live with schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia. And if you want to see more from us, make sure to subscribe. So in today's video, I'm going to be interviewing a gentleman by the name of Martin, who is going to be sharing his experiences with us around what his experience has been like managing his schizophrenia without taking medication. And we wanted to include someone's experiences on the channel who is not taking medication because that is one of the things that we get asked about a lot is, medication regimens, but also, if it's possible to manage schizophrenia without medication. And so I think a lot of the things we're going to talk about today are really important factors in terms of maintaining wellness and managing symptoms, potentially without the help of medication. What we are going to touch on as well, though, is when it might be time to, resort to going back on medication, whether for a prolonged period of time or for just a short period of time to regain stability. And also the importance of working in close conjunction with your psychiatrist or your doctor, to figure out how to taper down and off, or, how to potentially taper back up for a short period of time. All right. So welcome, Martin. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me, Lauren.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be talking about how you manage managing your schizophrenia while not taking medications. So I guess first question I have is, when were you diagnosed with schizophrenia?
I was diagnosed about 2001, and it took quite some time, a little bit of time to diagnose it, and I went through a few things before it actually worked out that way. So, but yeah, since 2001. So.
2001. And were you put on medication to begin with?
Yeah, I was put on antidepressant, and I was a little bit perplexed, but I felt that it was like a reflex action from my general practitioner, because where I live, you go to a general practitioner first, and then he refers you to consult a specialist. But I think it was just they do it as a reflex, and then. So I ended up seeing a psychiatrist then shortly after that.
So what were your initial thoughts with being put on medication to begin with?
I felt like a failure, and I didn't need to take them. I just wanted to get back to work, and I hadn't had a sick day in 19 years. So I knew that things were worse than they normally were, but I felt that by working more and being at work, I could get through that. So yeah, I just wanted to get back to work.
Yeah. So I guess, when did you decide to stop taking medications?
Yeah, well, I started discussing with my psychiatrist. I put on so much weight, and I put on like almost 5.5 stone of weight in a very short space of time. It seemed to be almost overnight. And I changed so much from the person that I was, and I was having a discussion with the psychiatrist about the medication generally, because I was on a whole cocktail of things. And I said, it wasn't really touching the symptoms. I was getting a lot of command hallucinations and things like that, and it wasn't really doing anything. It wasn't even muting them sometimes. So we discussed that. He said the only alternative would be to go on, I think it was clozapine, but that's the really knockout one, and I didn't really want to do that, because I think he sensed that I was perhaps I didn't want to take anything, which is a bad thing for anyone who's schizophrenia. I think is to sort of have that, to go away from any sort of treatment at all, is a bad idea. We decided we'd run it down and see how it went. So we went in stages, and we sort of like adjusted everything a bit, and then plateaued and waited to see if I was okay, and then moved it on down. And eventually I was able to get off it over a period of a few years until I wasn't anything at all. So and I only did that in consultation with a psychiatrist. I wouldn't have done that myself. I would have kept on taking things, I think, and because I think if you go to your specialist or a doctor, you should do what they tell you. You have to trust them at the end of the day, I think. So, yeah.
I think that's really great, though, that your psychiatrist, I think it was, listened to your concerns about being on medication and worked with you to reduce. And important to note that it took, you said 2 years, I think, to
Yeah,
slowly
it was two
taper
years.
down.
Yeah. I think it worked that way. I think it's because I think you can't really stop things because they're very, very powerful, all these things. And I was on quite a host of things, as you'll find people in our situation are, I think, anyway, and you end up going in one thing and then you get something else to counteract the bad end of that. And before you know it, you're into half a dozen or six or seven different things. And I think, but I just wanted to I just felt completely adrift, away from my moorings. I mean, that's how I describe it for myself. I just felt completely, and I thought the way to do it was to take control of it, and it's worked for me. It's worked for me so far, anyway.
So have you had to make any other kinds of changes in your life in order to compensate for not being on medications?
I had to give up a lot of things I was involved in. I was involved in playing golf and diving, a lot of technical diving, and I think I gave it up voluntarily because I felt as if I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore, and it's a terrifying thing. It is, because I hadn't been. It was a really uncommon feeling for me, but I felt that I couldn't trust myself because in the type of stuff we were doing, you really have to be at the top of your game, and people depend on you, and you depend on your own skills and things. So, and I felt that the sense that had become detached from something, I felt didn't really go together with that. So, and I was in a few other clubs, like shooting clubs and stuff, and through legislation here, I wouldn't have been able to continue doing it anyway. And that was another big turning point for me. Also, it's all those things that you used to take for granted were no longer there, and they're not there anymore either. So that's it.
Yeah. Do you use any particular coping strategies to help you out with not being on medications to manage your symptoms?
I think what I do on a regular basis is I've a self-inventory, or checking my status relative to work and to interaction with other people and my daily life. And I think I look for, if there's a downturn in something or something I need to adjust, I keep a regular check on myself almost. And I'm not silly. If I felt I needed something from the doctor, I would go and seek it out and have a chat or get something, and do something. But I think my baseline is I can do this okay, and I'm going to work and I'm looking after myself and I'm attending my dental appointments, my hygienist, all those things. I think it's things you take for granted before that then become your measure of your life, if you know what I mean. And I think that's very important. And a lot of things that I do, I pay attention to, are good things. They're meeting my friends and my brother and getting out for a walk and things like that, like they're good. But I try and do that just, and I've also reduced my working hours by 20% at work. So I have a break in the middle of the week of a day. So I'm in 2 days and then I'm off for a day, and I'm in for another 2 days and I'm off for the weekend. And that works for me because it sort of allows you the midweek day to recharge and get ready for the rest of it. And it seems it's working very, very well. And that was the recommendation of the firm's doctor that I do that. So, and it was good because I felt that when I was at the firm's doctor that I would be suspended and sacked, as what I felt was going to happen, but it was the opposite of that. They want, for some reason I still don't understand, they wanted to keep me at work. So it's worked out okay now so far. So
that's great that they were willing to, work to accommodate your situation and still wanted you around and contributing.
Yeah.
So it sounds like work is part of your coping, as well as getting accommodations to keep working, which is great. Taking care of your health, keeping social ties, and just kind of being self-aware is kind of what I was hearing in terms of when you need to go and check in with your doctor.
Yeah, that puts it very, very well. That's all those things apply, and it's a constant thing. You can't leave it alone, because I've tried this bit about ignoring it and thinking I'm okay, and I forget about it, but I can't really, and I think it's a bit about, and you're in denial sometimes, but there's nothing really going on. But it's until then you come up against and you realize that it's there, okay, it's just waiting for you. So that's yourself. So
that's I think a really important point. I think that sometimes when you're struggling with not wanting to take medications for schizophrenia, it's often coming from a place of, wanting to deny the fact that you are living with schizophrenia and that you don't need medications or whatnot. But in order to successfully, try being off medications, you need to be very self-aware of your condition and, what it means for your life and what, coping mechanisms you need to employ. So yeah, that level of self-awareness I think is really important. Have there been any periods where you've needed to go back to taking medication?
I've the medication I took. I was doing quite a little bit of traveling for work, and I was taking some diazepam for the traveling, for the flying, and things. And I had a real problem with because there was jobs and that were flights 2 or 3 times a week and things. And again, I felt as if I could just go blithely and do whatever everybody else was doing, but it didn't really work that way. So, and I think the diazepam definitely helped. And I tried not to take it, but it was there, and it was there if I needed it. And again, I'm not into keeping something and then like keeping it tantalizingly out of reach. If I need it, I would take it. But I preferred the baseline again is I try and get by without it, and it worked up to a point. I was off then in 2017 for a year and 18 months, and I'm not traveling for work anymore. So I think it's unfortunate because it's part of the job that I really enjoyed, and it was the challenging aspect of it, So, but who knows? It might change, but I doubt it very much. I think once that happens, then they don't change their mind. So, but yeah, I think, and also I've had some amitriptyline for my sleep, and my psychiatrist recommended that because he said he takes it himself, which was good to get it from someone who's experienced of it. But even then, I think the best for sleep for me, I think, is we've recently started going back into work for a couple of days a week. We've been all working from home the last year or 2 years almost. And I think the exercise and the actual activity going out about makes me more tired in the evening time, which is the way I would prefer it. I'd prefer just to be dog tired and then fall asleep rather than take something. But yeah, I'm in discussion about. I'm constantly talking about when I see him about medication and about things that could make things better and me more productive. We're always having that conversation. So
yeah. So you're currently open to taking medications again. So I guess my next question would be like, how do you know when you might need to start taking medications again, or when you might need a period of taking medications?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to be very determined and stubborn, and it'll be the last thing I think that I will do, to be honest, to go back on. I think the shock of the drugs, and particularly one of them, was just something that I was unprepared for, and I felt as if I'd lost myself completely. Really, it was just the oddest feeling. If I could go back on perhaps a minimum dose of something, and then try and work it the opposite way, try and start in the minimum and only go up so far that it's having an effect, rather than go for like the big guns. I think he went just straight up. Within a few weeks, I was on the maximum dose of one particular drug, and I think that was perhaps it shocked me. I think, but if I perhaps tried something which was less, and then build up and then say, right, that's enough. I'll just stay there and let's see what happens. You'll go the opposite way. That's my idea of it. I think I'm having a conversation. I'm back now in mid-October, and we'll talk about it then as well. So because it's tough to stay. It's tough. It is. I'm finding it tough, I have to say. So
do you mind sharing what some of the things that are coming up that are kind of, initiating you to think that maybe you should try to start tapering back up on medication again?
I'm losing periods of time. I seem to be losing periods of time, and I want to have someone to say, listen, could you just tell me what passed there, because I'm not sure if it did, and that's a bit disconcerting. And I tend to have my visual hallucinations. I've heard others, talk about their minds are much more like shadows and spider things like that, and I'm seeing that at work as well, and I'm getting a bit paranoid at work, and really, really paranoid at work. So and those are indicators, I suppose, that I need to be having a conversation about it. I think I'm hoping it will pass, of course, but I have to be prepared for the fact that it won't. So because I know when this all kicked, when it started off 20 years ago, it wasn't a good period of time, and it was a very serious thing, and and I could have ended up being incarcerated, and for a long period of time, and I wouldn't have taken kindly to that. I have to say, after when I come out the other side of it, I wouldn't have taken kindly to that at all. I think that's something that I feel strongly about. I think there's perhaps some of us end up being given stuff that we really don't need to be on and being incarcerated, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy whereby the drugs then give you the symptoms that they're expecting to see from someone who's defiant or who's not doing what they're told. And you know what I mean. That's how I feel. I feel strongly about that because I've seen it in my own professional life, I think. And it becomes then it's easy just to give drugs out. I mean, it is, and to put people, and once you start, if it's down in your notes that you're non-compliant and things, then it's never going to go away because that's, especially if it's a psychiatrist puts it down. So, and I was very, very cautious about that. I think if I'd have seen someone, I was lucky to see the person I saw. I think my general practitioner, he wanted me to see a trauma specialist, I think, and he was a trauma specialist, and I think he was the best guy to see. If I'd have seen someone else, if I'd have gone to someone else, it could have ended up very, very differently. I think he said that someone else would have taken an assessment over an hour, and you'd have been based on that for the rest of your time. So, but because luck has a bit to play on it, I think for me anyway, it has been that way, getting the right people. I think there's someone in physical illness. If you go to an emergency room, it's whether you survive or not is the person you see first. And I think it's the same for mental health. I think so.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is to work towards finding a psychiatrist or doctor who's going to work with you toward your goals. And if, one of your goals is to try being off medication and seeing how that goes, then yeah, that's great that your psychiatrist worked with you on that.
I don't always agree with him, and I find him infuriating. I mean, I really do. I find him infuriating because he's right. I think that's right, because I have lots of deep character, and one of them is I always think that I'm right. I mean, I really do. You can be the biggest expert in the world, but I was sitting going, no. I know better than you do. So, and I think there's one particular point that he comes back to quite frequently, is that he said that getting into a relationship for me is probably out, and I find that very hard to take. But I understand what he's saying. I think that's because I think all in and around the fact that I'm still working and still I'm getting on with some sort of function in life is because I've only me to look after and me to think about, I think. But it's a harsh thing. I think we all have to face harsh truths in this, and perhaps that's mine. That's one bit. I still don't agree with him though, so we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
With that either. Close relationships can be, almost a protective factor too, not necessarily just yeah.
Yeah, I know but it's one of those things that, as I say, he can be infuriating. So yeah.
So protective factors are one thing that I did want to go over with you. Do you recognize any protective factors that have maybe helped you be more successful in terms of being off medication? Things like having increased insight and, having a job to focus on and that is accommodating for, working with you in terms of, working around managing your illness and, having a good relationship with your psychiatrist. But I wonder if there's other things like, I believe you got a university education. Is that correct? So you have education, higher level of education. You had a close partner, your ex-wife, who kind of helped you manage things to begin with. And like protective factors like that maybe helped you in terms of being more situated to manage your illness. Are there any other things that you can think about?
I hear a lot of people talk about the Einstein factor, about intelligence and things being, because a lot of the two friends that I know that I've talked about this to say, oh, you must be a genius, because there's a fine line between genius and madness and all this. You've heard all these things also.
Yeah.
But yeah, and even Paul, he mentioned the last time, he says, oh, the Einstein effect and all this sort of stuff. And I have a very high IQ. I was tested when I joined the army. I was tested, and I have a very high IQ. But perhaps that has something to do with it. I read somewhere, you've got to be careful. There's so much stuff to read and to research that you've got to be careful what you read, and it's not all useful and it's not all correct either. And there was something, I think age is as you get older, some of the symptoms are thought to be less, but I think the negative symptoms can increase. And The fact is that if you have a good support network is really vital. I think it's vital. It's not just if you have schizophrenia, it's vital in any stage in life. And I think I have got a good support structure of people that if I need to reach out to, I can do it anytime. And I was with friends last night and they wanted me to stay over and don't drive home and stay with us. And you get that all the time, and they're non-judgmental at all. They're just the best people you could ever wish for. And my brother and my sister are exactly the same. So and there are factors I think that make the and being success. I think getting a degree and having it's that sense of that you're contributing something. I think I would be lost without the fact that I thought if I felt I wasn't contributing anything and I wasn't maybe valued a little bit, And when I'm at work, I like to do the same work as everyone else. I don't want somebody to come along and say, right, we're going to stop you doing that because you can't do it. They're not going to be that blunt. But if I get the sense that they're doing that, I wouldn't be very happy. I want to continue to do what everyone else is doing. I might be there for less hours, but I don't want anyone to do my work for me. So it's been valued and contributing, earning a wage, paying your taxes, doing the normal things. I agree with that. I like all those things. I think I do, and I think if you end up, it could have equally gone a different way. There was a point, I think, when my wife left. I think there was a point where it could have gone the opposite way entirely. I could see it, I could feel it, and if I hadn't have kicked in and did something about it, then I think I could have easily ended up on the street. There's no doubt about it, and that's a terrifying thing. But you hear other stories of other people who were successful and all sorts of illnesses, and they end up losing everything, and you think, well, that will never happen to me, but it's only a heartbeat away sometimes, I think.
I've had the same thoughts where, I don't want to diminish the efforts you've made in terms of managing your illness off medications, but, these
Yeah,
protective factors do play a large role in terms of, encouraging success. And so, if I had lost some of my protective factors, or if I didn't have some of the protective factors that I did, I know that I probably would have ended up on the streets, homeless or in a much more dire situation. So, yeah, understanding that there are a lot of factors at play in terms of maintaining wellness.
it's funny that you say about fearful of ending up in the street. There's times when I found that prospect attractive.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if absolutely. I just wanted to travel somewhere and just check out and just don't talk to anyone, don't have any responsibilities. Just and no, I have nowhere. I just wanted to no one. I don't want anyone to come near me or touch me or anything at all. I could felt that so strongly. I mean, it was very, very alluring. It is, and it's really. I find it very curious. I have to say because it doesn't really go away. It's a very curious thing. I remember watching a program many years ago about homeless people, and it was in London, and it was one of these programs, which is just they let the people's experiences speak for themselves. They don't try and there's no script, there was no music, there was no emotive talk, over the top. It was just showing, and there was this particular young fellow, and his thing was when he got enough money, he didn't buy alcohol or anything. He bought some food, and he took a long train journey on the train, just so that he was traveling somewhere, from point A to B and then back again. And I have to say, my happiest moments are when I'm traveling in between things, because you're neither one place or another. And I find that I remember thinking, I think, my goodness me, that's me without the homeless aspect. I understand exactly how I felt when you're in between things. You don't have to. You're not touching any people or things, and it's really strange. But I think, as you say, that's a common experience. I think with schizophrenia or other that type of illness. I think.
I haven't heard anyone else talk about that, but as you're talking about that, I can completely relate to that feeling of, just being at peace when you're in between things because you
Yeah,
aren't really tied to anything. You can just kind of let your mind be. And so I don't know
yeah,
if I don't know if that's part of schizophrenia or whatnot, but yeah, I definitely relate.
yeah. Well, that's really good because I thought it was just like a lot of experiences I think I've had. I think it's just me sometimes, but then sometimes I think, well, everyone experiences this, but some of them I think are just unique to me. But I suspect none of my experiences are unique to me. I have it in common with everyone else. I think that's just the way it is. So yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you for sharing. I suppose the last thing that I just wanted to ask you is, you're considering trying medications again. So I just kind of wanted to get a feel for what is your approach to, balancing needing to be on medications, if you do, with not wanting to be on them, and how do you kind of manage that?
I think I try and keep stress to a minimum, and
Yeah.
it's impossible. I think because I find with me, it's not just when people think of stress, they think of the negative stress, which every life has, no matter who you are. But it's the positive stress I get more troubled by when I'm happier and when things are going well. I find that I'm attacked more then by this than anything else because I think it's that old thought that this is not real, it's not going to last, and the voices are saying, don't enjoy this because it won't last. This is not who you are. Go back to the way you were. And that's how it is, I think. And it comes more when I'm happier and when things are going well. I think you're always looking for that. When I was working before in the last job, it's when somebody gave me praise, I was sort of looking around for the hole they were going to push me into. But I think that was the illness working in me. It was getting paranoid about everything, I think. But I think there's not a waking moment in my life. I think that this illness doesn't affect in some way or other, and I just have to accept that. But work for me is part of my strategy for some sort of normality in my life. I think it's like the main structure, and everything else is centered around that. I think, and
Mhm.
that's why I think I pay attention to it more than anything else. I think, and the work day with other people is good. It's rewarding, and when you're helping someone else as well, and they're helping you, there's nothing better than that. I have to say, and even when you've had a busy day, it's really really satisfying. When you go home late at night and you're tired and you think, well, it was tough, but it wasn't too bad, and I'm glad I was there today. That sort of way. And I think, yeah, the responsibility that come with work, I think that's key for me at the minute, and I'm hanging on to that life ring. I think I definitely am. I think that's not overstating it. That I think work for me. If I wasn't working, I think it would be problematic. There's no doubt about it. I think so.
Mhm.
I wouldn't last. I think if it wasn't working.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, work has that role in your life and that it's kind of a positive thing most of the time. Because,
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of people with schizophrenia are, kind of unable to have regular full-time jobs because they're unable to, cope in that environment, or they're unable to keep up with that the way the environment is currently structured. So, I'm glad that you have that to center yourself.
I do think though, if my employer knew some of the experience, the things I've been through, and had the conversations I've had with my psychiatrist and the OHS, and they both cautioned me not to explain anything to my employer at all about anything. They said if they want to hear anything about your symptoms or what you need, then they refer back to them, and then they'll talk to me, and then they'll filter it and tell them, in that sort of way. And because I think if I told my employer, or if I was symptomatic in a particular way at work, I think it would be the end of it. And that is a constant worry. It is a worry. I think even though they're open to things, I think with us particularly, I think schizophrenia is a very serious mental illness, and I think it has its own peculiar way of outworking in us. And I think if I was the guy, I worry about that, and it's come quite close. It has been close. There's no doubt, and that is a wee bit scary. So, and I don't think there wouldn't be any coming back from that. I think they would have to. I think they realized that I think when I couldn't travel anymore on public transport and stuff, I think they recognized that perhaps it was time to sort of call a halt to that. So, but and I feel really, I feel really, I don't like that. I have to say I don't, because it was a major part of my enjoyment of the work. So yeah, but it is what it is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and for talking to us about, what it might look like to manage schizophrenia while not taking medications. So, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Martin.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again and take care.